at this point in the 21st century, when we have nuclear weapons, but we also have the ability to exchange information and understand each other on the deepest levels possible through social media, if we cannot get together and figure this out, like man to man, woman to woman, like anything in between, but just talk it out and find our way there, like we have failed. Like we have failed.
This has been one of my favorite episodes yet. My guest, Zack Alexander, is not one to shy away from heavy topics and uses his platform to talk about war in the Middle East as well as doing deep, deep shadow work. In this episode, Zack and I go hard for life as we unpack the templates of masculine leadership we were raised with. It's easy to see how these faulty templates are pervasive throughout society and are best exemplified by the current men in positions of leadership and what they are modeling for younger generations. We discuss how the system is set up to propagate these patterns and how ultimately it is rigged against your healing. Once you understand the game you're playing, though, you can begin to create new rules for the game. In this case, we discuss the type of leadership that's needed in order to unravel these faulty templates, how those who have been called to a life of service can serve in a place like Gaza, and the desperate societal need for new elders. We cover some pretty hot-button topics and address very confronting shadows in this explosive episode of the Hard for Life podcast.
You are listening to the Hard for Life podcast with Thomas Scott.
We've been given a template that, as boys, just isn't sufficient anymore. It's not relevant.
Yeah.
And so I would love for you to start by sharing what your template was that you had been given, you know, and like where that came from. Like go in deep on that. I can share about mine too. I'm happy to go, I go hard on this thing. So I'm happy to be really vulnerable here as myself.
Yeah. Oh, okay. It's gonna be dark.
Let's go for it, bro. I'm here for it.
It's gonna be dark. Yeah. Okay. What type of man did you think you needed to be growing up?
Ooh. So I grew up Catholic. I grew up the oldest of 6 kids, and I will put the disclaimer, my family's lovely. They're lovely people. I'm so blessed to be in this family. And there was a lot of fucking trauma growing up being in this family.
Yeah.
And I think when you ask this question, it's like one of the expectations as a man is to hide that shit, is to not be vulnerable or open that, hey, I was taken care of physically, but emotionally, not at all.
Yeah.
And I'm still working to open up that door with my dad, with my mom, with my siblings, and we're taking steps. But it's really crazy to me to be involved in communities like the ones that I know you and I are involved in, where I can show up authentically as myself and everyone's like, thank you, come here, we love you, we want, be a part of this.
Yeah.
Whereas I show up at my parents' home, and if I don't fit the narrative of who I have been for most of my life, everyone's like, hey, something's wrong here, don't talk to me like that. You know, they get very defensive because it breaks their narrative of the world in a lot of ways. And so I want to start there and just be like, my experience of masculinity is I had to fit into a tiny box that was predefined by the men in my family. Really, actually, that's not true. Predefined by the women in my family. Yeah. My mom is actually who decided what the box of masculinity should look like.
Yeah.
And that's kind of fucked.
Yeah.
It's not from she didn't do it maliciously. I absolutely, this woman is one of the most selfless women I've ever met. And at the same time, we all have our views of what things should be like. And that should, especially when parents put a should on their children, is damaging. It's damaging to who they can be.
Yeah. I think for me, my upbringing, my family, they're not lovely. I'm going to be fully transparent. I'm not going to bullshit. But the display that I was given of masculinity, and it was not just from a father figure, it was from teachers, it was from sports coaches, I'm going to be fully honest, was cowardice that was hidden behind false displays of strength. That was what I saw. This overexertion of it's like this narcissistic male projection of like screaming and yelling and like, look how manly I am, look how tough I am. Grew up right outside Philly, and but when it counted, or when there were real moments of like, are you going to put the needs of those around you above yourself? There was a huge defense reaction. There was a complete avoidance. There was a complete running away. There was just a complete lack of compassion and empathy. And so the things that I saw of men growing up were, you just had to shove it the fuck down, right? Put on a projection, a layer of, I've got it all together, right? I'm a tough guy, and just keep moving. And it's very false. And that is a toxic form of masculinity that we so often hear about. And I think there is an overcompensation going on in the men's workspaces where we're hyper vulnerable, we're hyper emotional right now. And I don't necessarily think that's healthy at all either. Like, I think there's a middle ground here with, I practice stoicism, which is to be really grounded in my emotional experience, to be really open to it, but to not let it be. Oh, there you go. See, you're freezing up a little bit, so I can't even. But
so it's a more tea.
Okay, beautiful. But yeah, the stoicism of just being really attuned to our emotional experience without letting it drive us or letting it like whip us around. To use it as information, to use it as a beautiful experience within ourselves, but it's not the primary motivating factor, what is driving us. It shouldn't be. But regardless, like, there is this notion of masculinity where can we put our own needs aside? Can we put the gratification of our own ego, like this hyperinflation of our concept of self, can we put that away when it matters, because we're supposed to protect and show up for others? Like, that's the masculinity that I've learned that to come into. But that was like 30, I'm 33 now. That was 31 years of being dragged through the shit and dragged through the mud and being around really negative forms of masculinity. And like I said, that was my ideal template that I was given growing up. And it's the ideal template that most men are given growing up. And then, looking back, I have to wonder why I had friends growing up that I adored dearly who went to jail or committed suicide, and because they were running on that same template. Like, it's not healthy. And now we see in today's world, and before we were jumping into the podcast, we talked about bringing this up, but like, the men who are in big positions of leadership, especially in Western society right now, right? Especially our political leaders, are men who are fitting this negatively tiered profile that we're talking about. So even growing up, then even when we turn on the media or turn on the news and we're looking for a leader, we're looking for someone like, what does this look like? Us men are given two decrepit old men. There is this hyper, and we see, I think some men, I'm not here to get overly political, but we see sometimes it's like hyper extreme, like almost infatuation with Trump amongst men. I don't think that's healthy, for a variety of reasons we don't have to get into, but like there is a lack of this healthy representation of what does it look like for a man who is in control of himself, who understands himself, who has allowed himself to be weak, who has allowed himself to like really be in those moments of powerlessness and helplessness within, but not let it drive him, not let it project all over, not to be embedded in the coping mechanisms of it, and to come back and to be in a real form of strength where he sees his environment, he knows he's here to protect, he knows he's here to serve, right? It's not fucking about him. It's not about how great he is. It's not about how strong he is. Like, I'm here to serve. I'm here to look out for the collective. And I can do so from that space while being aware of my shadows, while being aware of how I'm not perfect, while I'm aware of not putting on that mask. And that's something that I think in 21st century society, we're really still looking for.
Amen. You said that really well, brother. And what I want to address is going back to this idea of men and the men's work getting into their emotions really strongly, and how that is a pendulum swing in the opposite direction and not necessarily a healthy one. I imagine it comes down to intention. So the reason I do emotional work in this men's field is not so that I can just be in my feminine. It's actually so that I can hold space for the feminine. Because if I've not cleared all this shit out, if I am so bottled up, you see these men who they hold on to stuff so tightly that if a woman comes to them, or anybody, if they're children, if society comes to them with anything else that could cause an emotional spike, they eject right out of it. They just get mad. They're just like, shut up, go away. And they go eject, they go distract, they go isolate, as opposed to a man who is in touch with that side, so he knows how to release that shit, can actually hold a lot of it. And to me, that's the divine masculine template. That's the like safe male. I speak to Taylor a lot. Like, I don't know about you, I don't trust men who haven't done the emotional work. I just don't. Like, I have a quick story about that. The only time ever that I've been called for jury duty, it was for a murder case. And this man had murdered his wife. And I sat on that trial, and that was really wild. It was such a wild experience. It's one of those, like, most people who get jury duty are like, it's a boring court case. So like, I got a really very interesting case, but it was super traumatic. Like, he did it in front of his daughter, and she came and testified and was like 6 years old, and like fucking terrible stuff. And if I look into why that happened, intuitively, like, of course there's other things there, but intuitively, he couldn't hold anymore. He just snapped. And there's many stories of men just snapping, whether it's the physical abuse towards women or other things. And so when we look at our leaders and the people in positions of power, if they're not doing this kind of work, how the fuck are they holding all of this emotional tension and stress, and then give them the power of putting their hand on a nuclear button where they could just at any moment have that moment of snap? Is kind of fucking crazy to me. It's not kind of fucking crazy. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah, and it's insane because it's happening right now.
I know. That's what's crazy.
It's happening. It's happening right now. Like, we're seeing it in real time. And like, people across the world, like, a lot don't know how to process or deal with that because it's almost numbing of like, it's almost like we have to validate what's happening. We have to get lost in like, well, it's because of this or that. Like, but in reality, it's a lot of it is men in leadership who do not have a conscious connection to self. They've lost connection to their heart. They've lost connection to the humanistic aspects of who they are. They don't understand the layers of trauma at all. And so, they sit with it like, something happens, like a big event happens or whatever. And, the one I'll use is even back in October. And that emotional baggage and carnage you don't know how to do, and you have access to a huge military, and boom, like, it feeds it.
Well, and let's also talk about the age piece of it too. Like, I just looked up, Trump is 78 years old and Biden is 81. Social Security starts at 61 years old. That's like retirement age. So like, these guys are well past that. They're in that like, in masculine development stages. They are in the twilight years, or what they're called. They are in the years where these guys should be sitting on a farm, looking over the fields and watching sunsets and playing with their grandkids. At this point, possibly great grandkids. Like, it's to be leading the superpower of the world at a military stage. And this is the best. This is the best we can present. And as a country, we're all just like, oh, okay, that's cool. Like, people aren't in the streets being like, what the fuck? Like, how are the people in these financial institutions not saying that? Like, there's trillions of dollars on the line here. Like, if we just want to look at it from a money standpoint, why in the hell would you want a guy this old managing that? And I'm sure we can get into all of the reasons why that's actually happening, but it speaks to the level of insanity that's in our culture right now, which is outrageous.
It's outrageous, but we also have to remember that we are in a system, especially for men, that's designed and developed to make sure that we don't gain conscious connection within ourselves. And if we do, like we're popping off to like remote communities or living off the grid, like and doing our own stuff. But that's fine. Like the system's very happy for us to do that because it's like, great, you won't influence anything. You won't really like in terms of actually coming back in and you know, really impacting and affecting like the distortions within the systems. Like you'll just stay out there. Like, okay, go do that.
I'm so guilty of that. We all are. We all are. And I lived in Tulum for like 2 years.
Yeah, I've never applied a car.
Fuck.
So.
I'm one of those guys. I'm sitting here on a podcast off on my little island that no one can get to me.
Well, I mean, you know, this is, look, there's a time and place for everything, right? But I do want to say that like the systems are designed to make sure that like men like are like, and we do it to ourselves, right? This is the patriarchal attitudes, right? We've built this, I get it. But like the systems are designed where we're eating ourselves alive, right? So we built these systems, we've designed them, and we make sure that we're hyper productive. We're always doing something, right? Whenever we aren't able to be productive, like pop a pill, do something, get yapped up on caffeine, Coke, whatever, reinsert yourself back in. But if you allow yourself to have those deep moments of vulnerability, if you allow yourself to seep into grief very deeply, positions of power and influence that will wipe you out.
Yeah.
And I experienced this personally when I went to, I'm someone who had a very traumatic background. I nearly dropped out of high school, like in a way I did. And, you know, then got a full scholarship to a top US law school. And like my whole thing was like, I wanted to be a child advocacy lawyer. Okay. And around that time, like I uncovered a lot of trauma. I cut off my family. There was a huge explosion around that. Right. And like I was very open, like with my legal institution at the time of like, guys, like I'm not okay. Like I'm processing a lot of grief. It's hard for me to go to classes regularly. And I was told that someone with my background would not excel in their first year there. Like that was the
Interesting.
And it was like a slap in the face.
Yeah.
And I watched the system or the person who was handling my situation, right? You got to remember, like I'm very open and transparent. Like I just need some things done for me. I need a little bit of help and resources in these ways. And the way it was handled was horrific. I will still say that like to a T. And it was almost designed to push me out. This is a man who's just dealing with his shit. And I remember like, you know, them coming to me and even saying, someone in your position, like all of your professors think you're going to fail. And I remember like on my midterms, I went and I finished above median. Like I literally did above like average, like in this class with all these kids who had 20 to 30 times the resources I had growing up. And then I left. I like literally withdrew after the semester because I said, oh my God, like this system is not designed for someone who has to go into their shadows, who has to go into their trauma, who cannot come up into positions of political influence, leadership, legal leadership, right? You know, long term, I wanted to be a federal judge. And so like, I can't come up with this layers of trauma that I hold in my body. And you want me to participate in a system that is telling me to fucking shove it.
Yeah.
And I'll be fully transparent is I've watched my other like classmates go through something similar later on where the systems just devour you if you want to tend to those parts of yourself. So when we're asking like, well, why are people as old as Trump or Joe Biden like in office? Like, why are these the ones that we're electing right now? It's because the systems are designed to not let someone like me or you in right now.
Wow. Right?
Of our age or even like early mid 40s who've encountered this work, like the systems have not opened up like that yet. And so as men, like if we want to be in positions of leadership and power, it's a lot of, we have to take a lot of backdoor avenues. Like there's nothing wrong with you being off grid. Like we have to take those avenues to be able to tend to those parts of ourselves, to be able to give ourselves those space. A lot of times we can't like hyper participate in these 9 to 5 or 40, 50, 60 hour work weeks when we're doing all this work. Like it's not a balance. But then eventually, like some of us will be called and guided to reinsert ourselves back into those systems. And it's going to be a bit of a doozy.
Yeah. Yeah. When you say bit of a doozy, what are you implying with it?
It's going to be a little bit like breaking down a wall.
Yeah.
Okay. Like we're talking about systems and an attitude, right? Like we're even talking about corporate America. That is like, you better produce, you better function, or we will show you the door. Okay. And this is how we've been modeled, that this is how we turn our profit motives. Like this is how this is how the shareholders benefit the most. And so to kind of come in, and this is what a lot of my clients are even trying to do now, is they're very hyper educated, they're very successful, they had to step away from the corporate environments, but some know they want to go back, and it's to show them that there's a different way here.
Yeah.
Okay. That these old paradigms of leadership, these old paradigms of functioning, even in business, corporate settings, like they're not working anymore, not the way you think.
Yeah.
So it's an upheaval in a way. And
yeah, it's a revolution.
It's an evolution, but no one likes the initial stages of evolution.
Yeah.
Right. Revolution. Yeah. And no one likes the initial stages because the ego seeks out what's familiar no matter what.
Yeah.
And if the people in positions of leadership and influence to the highest degrees have not, aren't even aware of the concept of what the ego is, we've got some problems.
So I'm really curious about what got you so passionate about this, because I experience you as someone who is really fired up to talk about these types of things happening in the world. You've dove right into the most political space there is with the Israel-Palestine conflict, and that takes balls. And it also is just, I imagine you have some life experiences, some things you went through that, as we all do in this healing space, that galvanize us to step into this field of change.
It's been an interesting path for me. Like, obviously I went into to law school with the intention of being a child advocacy lawyer.
Why?
And so there's been a fiery motive for a very long time of I have my principles, I have my values. And there have been some movements, I don't need to get into co-opted these words, but to really protect children, to really create spaces where every child deserves to be protected, deserves basic fundamental treatment. And so when I see that being violated, I'm going to throw myself in, no matter what. And that's your fight. That's my fight. Yeah. And that's happening to the 10th, 12th, 15th, a millionth degree over in Palestine now currently, right? Children are being murdered ruthlessly. It is a genocide. It's and it's horrific. But for me, I think I've always known that what happens in our world matters. And it's been interesting for me because when I initially had my spiritual awakening and I initially entered into these spaces, right, I was given a lot of this kind of dialogue from different spiritual teachers of everything's perfect, it is what it is. If you want to influence change, it's a trauma response. You're giving energy to things that you're creating these things, like it's all theater, it's all theatrics, just be in your bliss, be in your euphoria, right? And I remember participating in those ideologies and in those dialogues, right? And really internalizing it to some degree, right? Maybe it just is, right? And I knew that I did not feel right. I did not feel correct within myself. I felt I'm like, I'm doing all the things the spirit teachers like told me to do, but somehow I feel worse than when this process started. Like, what is going on? And look, I really believe that everyone here does have a different journey. Like, you know, everyone here from their own place, like, really does have, I think we make mistakes of that, even the political activism realm of saying you have to know that, like, no, like, everyone's journey is different.
Yeah.
Everyone here is really to do something different. But I felt like what I came here to do, what has always resonated in the deepest parts of my soul, right? Which was to be a leader on the ground in real movements, right? And to shift the collective in those ways. Like I was castrated or cut from that. And so a lot of my journey, especially with rediscovering my masculinity, is coming back into and honoring and accepting that, like, this is who I am. Like, this is who I was always going to be. And it's important for me. And, you know, we need men in these political realms who understand trauma healing, who have a connection to spirit, who understand the layers of the metaphysical realms, right? But are grounded and integrated and can lead from that place.
Yeah.
And so, you know, this is something that took me some time to realize, but this is where that fire and that passion, and you can feel the energy light up in my system when it comes up.
Yeah. Hurt people. And if we have people in positions of power who have not dealt with their hurt, they're just going to keep hurting people. That's the way this works.
110%. Like, oh God, I hate to even bring it up, but like, I hope you don't mind if we go here. Like, yeah, I will never forget the moment I did not think Barack Obama was a good president. Okay, like, I felt like this was a man who ran an incredible campaign. Even in my younger years, I was gassed up. And like, I felt like he laid an egg in like the 8 years of office. Like, he just laid an egg, right? And it's like, oh God, like, you did nothing. And, you know, I read his book, Dreams of My Father, which was, you know, an autobiographic text from him. You know, he wrote it, before he even ran for political office, I believe. Yeah, definitely. And, you know, he wrote about his upbringing and his relationship with his father and all this stuff. Like, this was a man that was essentially abandoned by his father. And his father was an alcoholic, and he only met him 3 times. And I'm sitting reading this book. I'm like, oh, you are so traumatized.
Yeah.
Like, you are so traumatized. And then this man found himself launched into the most important position of the free world, right? And it's like, I don't know Barack's background, but it doesn't, from what I've heard in interviews, it does not feel or seem like that layer of trauma was really ever dealt with in a wide variety of aspects. And the more that you read or learn about people that hold really influential positions of power, there is so many layers of trauma there. And it has not been dealt with, and they're acting from that space. They are acting from that space of that little boy who was never loved, or little boy or little girl, but little boy who was never loved, never gained dad's approval. Like, all you have to do is look into the bushes, and you're the things driving you into these positions. They're not authentic, or they're not integrated, and you get in these spaces, you're hurt, you haven't dealt with your hurt, and the systems just continue to run essentially. Right. The systems want people who are heavily traumatized, who like haven't dealt with that, who want power.
Because the people who are running the systems are heavily traumatized. And what I've experienced in this work is anytime honestly, it's like, sometimes I find my presence is just confronting to people who haven't done the work. Like, I don't even have to do much. I just have to be there, and it can trigger people. Yeah. And so, of course, the people who are running these systems that are essentially machines to churn out more people like themselves, or people they can control. How do you control a healed person? How do you control a person who's found peace inside themselves? Someone who's not manipulated by fear.
You're nailing it. I mean, that's exactly it. Right.
So how do we get out of a system like this? I imagine there's some clues here.
I mean, I can't believe we're going to say these words because I've never said them before.
That's hard for life. I'll take it.
Yeah. It's a revolution.
Of course it is.
But not in the way that we think of a revolution, right? Like, because that goes wrong in so many ways throughout human history. It is an internal revolution, right? That then unfolds into the external. But we have got to be willing to unfold it into the external.
Amen.
That is the test now, I think, for a lot of us is will it manifest like the work has been layered. We understand these things. It has taken place. It has taken hold. But can we be actionable and allow that to unfold in the external? And
knowing that it might hurt us again.
Yes.
Like I've found for myself the biggest challenge with moving this stuff into the external, which you're speaking to my soul right now. I'm getting chills the whole time you're talking because you're speaking directly to me when you say these words. And this podcast is one facet of that, but there's many more to do. That, just putting thoughts out is great. It helps awaken other people, but there's actual action that needs to be taken in terms of overhauling this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this is layered. Like, I mean, we're going to have to access rage. Like, we're going to have to access anger, right? Like, anger is a driving force, but we have to utilize it appropriately, right? I mean, this is a whole other layer because for many of us, especially white men, right, which both of us are, it's easy for us to kind of step outside of these communities to do well in our financial lives and to kind of stay there. And then you're talking about going back into these societal systems and structures, right? Even the corporate structures.
Yeah.
And to allow that energy of like, this isn't right, like this is wrong, right? And to even in a way to destabilize our own internal peace to a degree. Right.
That's where I think I was going with that.
Yeah.
Like we do all this work to heal ourselves and it's like, fuck, I got to go like possibly get hurt really bad again. But the difference this time is it's a choice.
Yes.
We're choosing it. And so we're empowered in it. So it doesn't sit in our systems the same way.
And this brings up a great point of what is healthy masculinity. Okay. Warrior energy is not wrong or bad. And so when we talk about like, oh my God, like I could get hurt, I could get harmed, like I have to kind of go fight in a way. I think that the problem is that this warrior energy amongst men is misdirected.
Yeah.
Right. It's a beautiful, like UFC, like mixed martial arts, those are beautiful things, right, to release that energy. But like on the big scale, like just us bashing the shit out of each other in cages isn't what's going to influence change and reform, right? Like there's another step up to this. And it really is like to be able to channel and direct that energy and to use that voice and to say no, to literally like that is the healthy man. Like that is a healthy leadership amongst men, is to speak for the voiceless, to take charge for those who can't take charge for themselves, right? And to use our own social capital, to use our own privilege to be able to do so from an authentic space. And it requires us to, like I said, like the real healthy masculinity I've seen is the men that can, this is like the war general, like almost attitude, the men who can say like, this is like, I'm responsible for something beyond me.
Yeah.
Right. It's not about my own self, like, whatever is good for myself, like to look for something bigger of like, I'm willing to get cut up because this is the evolution of the collective consciousness.
Yeah.
Like this is the ascension of the collective.
Some of that willingness to get cut up is also just willingness to hurt others, actually. That's something that in this healing work, I'll share my own struggle with this, is I do all this healing work and then I see the effect my decisions make on other people. And sometimes that keeps me from stepping fully into my power because I'm like, oh, well, I'm going to go take ownership for these things, and the decisions I make because they are bigger than me will affect the people around me. And can I live with myself if I make a wrong decision or if I hurt people? And the answer is, that to me is the healthy masculine, is the masculine, we don't have to say man, the masculine who makes decisive action and then owns the consequences of those decisive actions no matter what. And has the courage to sit with the consequences of those choices.
Yeah.
Because it's oftentimes like in this game, it's easy for us to handle pain. We sit with pain all the time. Like pain is actually like, that's not the challenging thing. The challenging thing is the doing all this healing work. This is my own challenge. Doing all this healing work, then stepping out, knowing that I can make a wrong choice that can hurt people. And then I've opened myself to feeling people's emotions and feeling love at such a level that I'm like, wow, that could really hurt.
Yeah.
You know? Like I'll give a small example. I hired a bunch of employees for my company. They built their livelihoods around what I had built. And then when COVID happened, I had to let all of them go.
Yeah.
And like, that was so painful. I knew that there were kids who were receiving tuition in the Philippines because I had hired some people overseas. I had some people who were working for me that I know that the job I was giving them at the time was the best paying job they were ever going to get at that moment.
Yeah.
By orders of magnitude, because I had a rule for myself that I would overpay. Just because someone's in a different country didn't mean that I would give them the wage that they needed in that country. So I knew that kids were going to school based on my job I had given this individual and like different things like that. So like it's not as catastrophic as people's whole lives, but it's still one of those, like, you know, as a leader, your choices, if you fail, can have like effects on people. And that's painful. And then sitting with that and being willing to sit with it, being willing to look at it, being willing to feel the grief and to keep making decisions, to keep moving forward, to keep fighting the fight, even if you hurt people.
Yeah.
And you go like, fuck, I'm going to take that one and I'm going to hold it and I'm going to keep going. And to not bypass it.
Yeah.
To not get distracted by it. Like that's to me, when we start to talk about healthy masculinity, it's men who can do that, where they can just stand in the storm and just keep taking one step forward without lashing out, without being reactive, but constantly coming back to regulating themselves, taking another step. And I was talking to my fiance, Taylor, about nervous system regulation. And I imagine when people hear nervous system regulation, at least in my own experience, in her experience, we always thought this was like getting ourselves into the parasympathetic nervous system. That's not actually regulation. There's a sympathetic and parasympathetic. Most of us, when we're in stress, we're in the sympathetic nervous system.
Yeah.
And then when we're calm and relaxed, we're in the parasympathetic. Regulation doesn't mean that you're just never stressed. That's not it. Regulation is how you dance between the two that allows you to keep going forward.
You know, it's funny that you bring this up because, you know, my awakening, I'll be like there was the deep connection that was built, right? And so there's a surrendering and something else is guiding my process and guiding my experience. And you know, what I'm being told from healers and social media is I need to regulate. I need to get in calm states. I need to work with this, And like my higher self is putting me in nothing but the most extreme stressful states 24/7.
Yeah.
Right. And for me, it was like, I'm like, what is wrong? Why is my process not looking like this? Or what is going on here? Like I can do all the nervous system work in the world, but these are too inducing. Like these, and you're like, no matter what, I'm going to be dysregulated.
Yeah.
And the message that really came through is like, good, get used to it.
Yeah.
Like get used to that. And because this is only preparing you for what you're going to do in the future.
Yeah.
That we actually have to be able to learn, our systems have to be able to expand in those states.
Yeah.
To be in the survival self, to be in the fight or flight, and to still be able to really still have that pinpoint decision making and discernment while it's flaring.
Yeah.
Right? That we're not going to be able to regulate ourselves out of that, right? And not that this is pertinent to us, but like anyone is in a potential war zone or something, whatever, right? That's not relevant to us, but they can't regulate. Yeah. Like there's nothing they can do, right? It'd be disassociating for them to try to regulate themselves into that ventral vagal state. So the way of the masculine warrior is to be able to handle those really heightened sensations, those really heightened states.
Yeah.
And to still navigate and move with it, to flow with it. And that takes practice.
Yeah, 100%. And I want to get back to this idea of the internal revolution that you spoke about that needs to happen. I agree with that 100%. I've actually talked about that on the podcast. And I'm curious, what do you mean by that when you share that?
Internal revolution?
Yeah.
Well, collectively, we relate to our internal environments differently. Okay, that we understand the internal self on a deep level. Okay, that we are able to connect with this deeper awareness collectively, and we understand trauma. We understand cultural trauma. We understand certain coping defense mechanisms that have been built into our family systems. Okay, I think that we've done a really good job of getting this information out already, and we're able to really tap in and understand that, to really find that quote unquote true energetic self, that true soul self that can sometimes be hidden behind generations and generations of generational trauma, and also societal systems and constructs that are meant to separate you from yourself. Right? That internal revolution is the ability to even say, this work environment is not fucking healthy for me. Like, I'm literally willing to say, fuck off to the 6-figure salary right now. Take something that's more fitting to me, to my system, right? Like the Gen Z does actually a great job with this. And take a smaller salary to do something that is good for me, that feeds me and allows me to fill myself up. Like, I'm not going to operate in a way where I constantly have to cut myself off from my innate natural responses and reactions. Yeah. Okay. And so when we do that over and over again, when we collectively come into tune with ourselves, come into contact with ourselves, find our voice, find our own truth, find our own needs, find our hearts from a very really integrated place, we can't be controlled. We can't be manipulated, right? We're not going to be shoved into boxes of groupthink mentalities. Okay. And so we get to be then the ones who influence the systems. We get to be the ones, we don't bend to the systems anymore. The systems will bend to us. But it's an energetic force. And that's what sometimes people don't understand, that enough of us do this, the energy will hold. And no matter how much we're convinced otherwise, the systems will bend to the collective consciousness, the true collective consciousness. Yeah. Okay. And so that's what I mean by that internal revolution, is taking that power and sovereignty and autonomy back to ourselves and within.
I am like this, the phrase, the revolution will not be televised, is coming through to me. And it's like, of course, the internal revolution won't be televised. It's just going to be a state of being. And in my own system, well, first of all, I couldn't agree more with what you're saying there, like 100%. And when it comes to doing that work where you can't be controlled, the story I tell myself is that fear is the mechanism, it's the lever that is being pulled. And so when you learn to overcome fear, that's the thing. So what you're speaking to are people who aren't manipulated by scarcity anymore, or loss, or fear. And the best way I've found to do that in my own system is to just sit with it. When I have a fear come up that really, really wants me to go seek an external experience to quell that fear, that's the time to sit with it, even if that means that you might die.
I agree, but the way, and you've done this work, and it's like, and this is why you're a coach, and this is why you're in this space, and this is why people come to you. like most of us do not know how to navigate fear, and there are layers to that. That ability
There's a lot of layers.
to sit in that fear, to resource ourselves out of it when it's too much. But yeah, I think collectively we don't know how to metabolize fear correctly.
Yeah.
I
Great way to
see.
put it.
Yeah, no, like there's a spiritual industrial complex that tricks you into disassociating from your fear,
Yeah.
right? Fear is not real. Everything's perfect, and it's a dissociative tactic. It takes us away from our bodies. The ability to actually sit in and be with it, and somatically be with it, understand what it's telling us, what it's teaching us, right? Then it becomes a force. It becomes a fuel for good.
Yeah.
And so, but like I said, it's the ability to metabolize and transmute correctly this energetic of fear, right? And that's tough.
Yeah, and a lot of it does come back to trusting the body. That's the other thing that's happened in our society is we've been taught to not trust the body. We've been taught that if you are experiencing something, it's probably a disease, and that disease is catastrophic, and you need to go to the hospital, and you need to get a prescription, and all these kinds of things. And in reality, that's not true. And I have my own personal experience with that where I've spoken about it briefly on the podcast, but I've been working through gut health things for about 2 years now. Yeah. And it's been fucking intense. There was a period of time about 4 months ago where the symptoms I was experiencing in my body, if you typed those in online, it was like, you need to call an ambulance, not like, hey, take a pill or something. It was like, go to the hospital now, you're going to die. Yeah. And the fear that comes up from that is really intense. And like you said, I have done the work to sit with that, because I did sit with it. And some of it comes down to reconnecting to something bigger than ourselves. Yeah. Because if we're trying to resource this on ourselves, like by ourselves, no, we don't have the tools. But the moment you're connected to something bigger, a higher purpose, a higher power, a reason for being here, you can withstand these types of things, because at that point, it's not entirely on you. You're not an individual anymore. And it does, for me, the only way through this, like the biggest fears I've grown through, I'm not shy to share this, is by connecting to God. Yeah. That's it. And not, whatever someone's perspective of God, you can insert any word you want there. Source, creator, higher self, the earth, whatever it is. If you can connect to something that is bigger than yourself, that you are still connected to, that is a way to resource things you can't resource, because it is bigger. And whether that's just a mental construct or an archetype or like a fucking placebo, it works. It works. So it's like the moment we believe we're it, like nothing, like it's just my meager human consciousness and brain and body that can like carry these big things. I found that was crippling. That's what led me to wanting to commit suicide. The more I lean in on connecting to something bigger than myself, the more I'm realizing how fucking powerful I actually am. Yeah.
I love that. And I agree with you. It's just our versions and stories of gaining this connection, our relationships, we're a little bit different in the best way. Because I mean, I was bedridden and ill for 4 years. Like I was like, my body showed and told me like, this isn't working, like something's not working. Like, and so illness has been a huge part of my journey. And it's amazing that someone with the layers and levels of illness that I've gone through I don't get sick anymore. I was telling my partner, I don't get ill anymore. Isn't that crazy?
Wild? Yeah.
And it's just like, it's from all the trauma work and listening to myself. Yeah. But like, and at the same time, like, there's no way that I get to where I'm at in life, like if it hasn't been guided by a higher power to an extent, like the levels of trauma and stuff, like there's just no way. But it's interesting because when I had my awakening, when that connection came through, and it came through very strongly, like 6 years ago, it was not a ta-da moment. It was a point of anger and rage. Because I was like, what the, like, I'm going to say this, I'm going to use a line. I was like, what the fuck, bro? Yeah. Like I was bedridden and ill for 4 years. Like I've gone through this, like you were there I was like, what?
Yeah.
I was way better off just thinking this is just random chaos. And so my relationship with a higher source has been different because like I am connected to something bigger than myself. I know what it is. But like I've been led through hell like over and over and over again. And it's so interesting for me because this is spiritually led. Like it is guided for me to like go into the dungeons, and I'm like looking up being like, what are you still doing? And it's like, yes, I'm like, sorry. And you know, now I've come on the other side of this when we talk about like, you know, even me having to go in the shadows for the last 7 or 8 months to prep me to speak on Palestine from a more powerful place and more integrated space. But, you know, I now look at the relationship with God or source, and it's like you have to be willing to do the things that you're guided to do and not understand it in the moment. Because when I'm coming out on this other side, I'm like, oh, you really were preparing me.
Yeah.
Like you were really like preparing me. Like there are a lot of things that are not going to catch me off now.
Yeah.
Because of this journey. And that's a tough one that, you know, I talk with clients sometimes of like God must hate me because of this and that. And it's like, no, like sometimes there are deeper things. And sometimes like the world is a dark place.
Yeah.
Right. Like I had a very close friend commit suicide when we were younger. You know, what's going on in Palestine right now with like children being murdered ruthlessly. Like there are some things that just aren't divinely guided. And so it is a tough balance of gaining that connection for ourselves and then looking and recognizing that like humans are going to human.
Uh-huh.
And these things of humans being given free will, like it is true. And we are exploding ourselves sometimes. And so can we gain this connection to something higher and then get ourselves into positions of influence and power and do our own shadow work so we can actually carry out, quote unquote, God's vision, and not from like an evangelical, like fundamentalist, extremist state, but from a very just centered, connected state that gives power back to the people. And so the ways that humans have continually destroyed themselves because they're so cut off from a lack of understanding, doesn't have to play out anymore.
Yeah.
So I went on a tangent there, but like, you know,
No, it's perfect. And I'm grateful for it because it's making me think deeper about this industrial complex that we have, the systems that we have in place in society, and how they aren't conducive for someone to have spiritual awakening. Like you said, you were in bed for 4 years. Well, that's how long your awakening took. You know, it's like, and what we're missing is elders. Like that's something that has been around in cultures for so long. And the elders are the people who can sit there and look at it from a place of experience and go, oh, I see what you're going through. You got to just surrender into this as much as you don't want to. Our society and systems like, do not surrender into that. Take this fucking pill. Fight through that, produce, and in reality, what does that do? That creates cancer. That creates all these different kinds of diseases in the body as we disregard the natural processes that are happening. Whereas someone who is, you know, these shamans from ancient lineages or elders can look at that and say, hey, here's what's going on. You got to just surrender into this thing. And it's so hard for us to do that. Like that's the thing that's so challenging, especially if we want to go full circle back to this masculine blueprint. Is the masculine blueprint I grew up with was that you don't surrender into something like that. You fight. You fight. And all that fighting does is just prolong it. It makes it worse.
Yeah.
It speaks to a fundamental lack of trust. Like, talk about not being able to sit with fear. Well, you fight something like that. Where does that come from? That comes from a scarcity mindset. That's like, I'm not going to survive. I'm going to fall to pieces. I'm going to all these kinds of things, as opposed to leaning in. Like, to me, that's the inverse of this, is leaning all the way in.
Well, and that's what my process has been too, is a constant surrender and releasing, right? But I agree with you of it's been very hard and chaotic, and I've watched men who really were on the awakening journey and who have lost themselves completely because there isn't that eldership. Like they're surrendering, but there's not that eldership and guidance.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what that, like these in indigenous communities or whatever, like there was a natural coming up of an individual, right, in terms of ascending in consciousness and anchoring it in, because it was such a process that was guided by eldership. Like they created the container for the person to lose their mind, but those breaks were always in place, to so to speak.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think for us, and you know, it's for those listening, like you're kind of looking right now at the first generation of elders. And you know,
the new elders. Yeah.
And you know, we're fumbling around. You're watching us stumble because no one's really here to guide us, right? Like I'm reading books on Kindle from you know, anthropologists and shit like that. Like we're doing the best we can. And you're watching us fumble and stumble around. Anyone who's followed me on Instagram for 4 or 5 years knows that personally. And so that hopefully eventually, like within westernized mainstream society, we do have a little bit of eldership now. We do have a little bit of a guiding force, because right now, like our guiding force is Donald Trump and Joe Biden. So
yeah.
So,
And
this is like, you know,
anyone who thinks those guys are, anyone who wants to make the argument, no matter what, if you want to make the argument that Joe Biden and Donald Trump are the paragons of healthy masculinity, that speaks to something really deep in the psyche that needs to be looked at. If we as a whole world can't come together and agree on that, that's something that's speaking to a much deeper lack of a complete lack of a healthy masculine example. Period.
I mean, and Trump, like, here's what I'll say about like Trump, whatever, like at the very least, right, wherever, like, you know, his supporters who you know, love his policy, the way he show up, like he is someone who gains power and demeans people and has demeaned others around him. Like, yes, he's props them up around others around him, but it's not a healthy integrated form of leadership, right? And so I feel very confident and comfortable saying that. And so, like we don't know where to go to, and this is the lack of eldership. This is the lack of role models in Western society. Like I said, I think you're looking at a lot of like the first generation of elders coming up. They are people like me, yourself, many others out there. But like I said, people are watching us stumble around in real time because we're figuring it the fuck out. Like how like indigenous shamanic practices integrate into modernized Western society, deeper connection to self, what healthy, powerful masculinity looks like, right? In terms of this energetic terrain that we're at, with this hyper patriarchal system. So we're stumbling around, right? And so I do have like a lot of men come to me and they're like, I can't be a men's coach, or I can't be in position of power because look at the mistakes I've made, look at what I've done. And it's like, buddy, like you are meant to fuck up.
Exactly.
Like you are meant to fail tremendously. There is no other way you're going to learn. But as long as you take responsibility, you sweep yourself up, you get to the next stage, keep on going, right? But this hyper perfectionist, like God, the source is going to knock that out of you right the fuck away. And we need men, we need our elders to lean into the messiness, to lean into the mistakes, to lean into the discomfort, because this is how you learn. That's the only way. And you know, I'll say this, but this true path of being a man or a healthy man is like, at some point you got to be willing to die on the sword. Like you got to be willing to die on the sword. You got to be okay that there's not 100% chance you're going to make it out of this okay.
Amen.
You're not. And you got to be able to take that hit, because that's the realistic truth, unfortunately, right? And if you're on the other side of this, right, and you're not psychologically fractured beyond belief or whatever, like you're going to here to serve. You know, society is tough. Society will break you to your knees. And you have to figure out a way to overcome it.
Amen. That was very beautifully stated. I couldn't agree more. And to come all the way back home with this, I would love, this is something I've been asking my guests to share, and it's, the more I hear it, the more I'm getting a vision for myself, but it's also just a really beautiful question to ask. What is your vision of the new earth, or the vision for the new earth?
Here's where I so deeply disagree with like some of the spiritual community and the Bali and Tulum communities where like everything's going to explode, collapse, but we're in 5D and we're just going here.
Yeah.
I don't believe society has to collapse. I don't believe the world has to collapse, right? But there's going to be reform and change is going to be done through education, right? It's going to be from some of us getting on the ground. It's going to be diplomatic action. But like this new earth is one that is more connected. I see an education system that is not like a machine complex, right? That looks at kids like this are going to be factory workers and just puts them on a drill line, that actually like tends to the human soul. I look at workplace environments that actually serve the earth, that serve the communities around them, right? Leaders are educated, they're trained, right? It's a calling. It's not something to prop up like a narcissistic profile even more. And that we're all working in unison towards something together, right? That we understand the ego, we understand the need for the individual self, but that we're integrated enough that we're all collectively working towards something bigger and deeper together. I don't think a genocide and war, it has to stop. And that sounds like a crazy thing to people right now at this day and age or whatever. Like those paradigms are done. Mm-hmm. And somehow we have to see it again. Like it has to be done at this point in the 21st century when we have nuclear weapons, but we also have the ability to exchange information and understand each other on the deepest levels possible through social media. If we cannot get together and figure this out, like man to man, woman to woman, like anything in between, but just talk it out and find our way there, like we have failed. Yeah. Like we have failed. So war is done. Genocide is done. Okay. The ability to build systems and institutions that work for the individual, that is in.
Yeah.
Right. I think the way that we connect to God or source, or for those who feel cause that connection, right? We're noticing it's not going to come through like traditional religious institutions. Like it's not going to come through maybe even a yogi. Like it really is a deep individual thing that no one can have power over you on. Right. At least on the ground. And yeah, I feel like that is the new earth. I think our generation is the in-between. And that brings up some tough things. I know for myself, like I'll say it here, whatever I've announced in my stories, it's the first time I'm going to do so in an interview. Like I will absolutely be running for political office in the future. That has been something that really was given to me in ceremony about like a ceremony-ish about a year and a half ago. And I've just watched everything just kind of float me up on that timeline. But that's a new earth paradigm. Yeah. That, the former drug addict, screw up, fuck up, withdrew from law school, right? Became an Instagram shaman. Okay, right, white guy, right? Those paths, but understands trauma healing, understands bigger, deeper collective issues, has gone to hell within himself, right? Has had to confront my flaws and imperfections on the deepest levels. Like there's going to be space for someone like me and others like me to occupy positions of real influence, right? And to be able to influence policy, to be able to influence institutional reform, like that's a new earth, like that's a new paradigms. Not that these things collapse, but that we participate and become parts of them. But like I said, like the system's bend to us now. Okay, and so I feel like that's the new earth.
Amen. I hear your words, and I imagine you're extremely passionate about this, and I agree, and I can't wait for more individuals like yourself, like myself, to be in these positions of power. I agree that this is not I've said this on the podcast many times, but it's not tearing down all of the institutions that we don't like, and just anarchy in the streets and destroying the government and dismantling the police force and all these things, that's traumatic. That just sends us back to the Stone Age. We're all back to trying to figure out how the fuck we're going to eat the next day. That is not the way to do it. That sets us back all the way to a restart to just do this pattern over again.
Yeah.
And the name of the game is to lovingly transition these things out.
Yes.
And I speak to many times how war in the external is just a facet of war within ourselves. You want to heal war? You find where you are at war within yourself, and then take action from there. Because anytime we're like, hey, bad, wrong, all these things, you know, you go to a Palestinian and say, you're bad, you're wrong for doing whatever. You go to Israel, say you're bad, you're wrong for doing whatever. Well, you're just creating more fight.
Yeah.
They have to defend themselves and all these kinds of things. When we can find where we are doing these things within ourselves, when we're capable of these things within ourselves, it's a deep level of shadow work. It's like, I talked about this on my podcast with my fiance, Taylor. It's a real, people have got to be comfortable starting to look at the deeper levels of their psyche, like real deep.
Yeah.
And what that real deep is like, man, if you can't look inside yourself and see where, like, this is going to be crazy to say. This is going to be fucking crazy to say. But if we can't individually, I feel scared to say this, if we can't individually look inside ourselves and see where we're capable of murdering babies.
Yeah.
It's not that you would. It's not that you would. It's, are you capable of that? I feel so scared to say this, but it's the fucking truth, because you can see it in the external world. And so for us to sit there and be like, I'm not capable of that, that's just them. They're evil, they're wrong. You haven't looked deep enough in your own shit. And once you look deep enough, then you have the tools to actually address it in the world around you.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you're going to. It doesn't mean it's okay. It doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean any of that shit. It means, oh, I understand.
Yeah.
I understand.
Well, I mean, these are the deep level shadow work concepts of like, I see this a lot in the spiritual community where they're like, these people are 3D, I'm 5D, and you cut yourself off from, you actually energetically like cut yourself off from the collective, and that, I don't feel like that's the goal here. Okay.
That's another form of isolation. That's just cancer.
And dissociation, right? If we're all one, then honey, you're gonna, Karen, you're gonna participate in all this. And so like, when we do shadow work, we're also doing on the collective level too. Like we can't. I reject. Like we have to understand how this comes up, how this occurs. Like the energetics that fuse that, because then we're just like evil, bad.
Exactly.
Like you have to remember, like you would never look at a German today and say you're automatically bad, you're automatically evil. But yet people from their bloodlines 80, 90 years ago carried out like the most horrific thing ever. And they were complicit. They allowed it, they participated in it, right? And then we have, this is a tough truth, but you have Jewish people absolutely right in their new created state, like acting out elements of that trauma, like 100%. Right. And so this is a virus that can infect all of us. Like, you are not above it. Okay.
Yeah.
You are above it if you are willing to go below it.
There it is.
You're above it if you're willing to go below it and
there it is.
Look at it. Like, I'm Jewish. Like, there's a lot of work I had to do and sit with to still have some clear eyes on me, and it's fully not clear still while all this was occurring, because that activation is so intense.
Yeah.
And so it is like I'm on Instagram every day, and I am literally like, murdering children is wrong, and I watch the comments and the feedback because of this, and I'm watching in real time. Like an entire group of people that I share an ancestral bloodline with excusing it.
Yeah.
And so I still get them. Like, they're not evil, but like something has not been dealt with in the collective shadow that allows for the most horrific, heinous acts to occur. right? Or the ability to bypass it, the ability to not recognize, to look at it, to project it, to say it's on this, it's on, like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
It's in front of your face.
And so,
yeah.
and back to this vision of the new earth, I want to add a little addendum to it. Is like, okay, we see there's trauma happening to two groups of people right now. We know, because this pattern happens over and over and over again. Now the children of those two cultural groups are being traumatized, meaning if that is not addressed, it's going to happen again in a different way in 20 years from now. Like, this is just going to repeat itself, or 80 years, wherever. There might be a skip in the generation, but the point is, if we don't look, so to me, part of the new earth is we see when trauma's happening to a group of people, and we go, fuck, we need to address that. We need to actually, like, go support that.
Well, and so this is the new earth, I feel like, and I feel like we're going to see it soon, right? Is if you feel like you're someone very far along, and I'll probably be one of the first ones to go take this hit. If you feel like you're one of the very far along your path, you've been doing this for a while, and this isn't for everyone, right? It's different people. But like, you might be needed in Palestine.
Yeah.
More, not from a white savior complex thing, not at all, whatever, but you might be needed in Palestine more than you're needed in Bali.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's going to be a lot of internal work, because if one group is being affected and their children are being heavily traumatized, right, that there is going to be a working together of understanding trauma healing resources, of getting aid in, right, of doing real things on the ground, so that these children who have been harmed in the most, and this has been going on for a long time, there's a documentary from over a decade ago in Gaza where the kids are like, I need psychological and emotional healing, I'm psychologically fractured, 10-year-old kids saying this.
Yeah.
So there has to be real healing and resources on the ground, and our attention needs to go there, right? Especially since America's the one funding this right now. There has to be real healing on the ground, and the new earth is us recognizing that. Okay, and like I said, deconstructing the savior, the Western savior complexes within ourselves, deconstructing all that bullshit, right? The colonizing mindset within ourselves. I'm going to go over there and save them. No, but to be at a place where you understand how to respect and integrate into those communities. If those communities ask for a little bit of support, and whether it's financial or whether it's understanding some things, that we can provide that, but always from an empowering space. Right, always from a space that empowers the communities themselves. Okay, that is the new earth of really understanding our own privilege, our own capital, but not shying away, not avoiding it, but getting on the ground and getting dirty, and giving the medicine, or helping provide the medicine in the ways that's still in integrity and still respects the people in the way that's needed.
Yeah, amen. And I want to reiterate that point. That's if you find yourself having done this work for many years, because if you're new to the path, give yourself some time. This stuff it can't happen overnight. And the other thing I see in this spiritual game is so many people have their first awakening, and then all of a sudden they're a life coach, and they want to tell everybody how to do it. I was guilty of this. I read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, and decided I was going to convert my entire family right there. I just read this book, and I'm like, let me tell you about presence and being present. And we're excited about these new concepts, but there's no integration, no embodiment on them. And oftentimes what I see is people will learn something new, and to experience the embodiment, they'll want to go teach it to other people and to go take it to other people. And so there is a level of I'll take ownership for myself. I'm even this game of learning about trauma and how people experience it, and titrating and things where it comes, how to healthy ways to help people navigate their trauma. Mm-hmm. I'm still learning myself. I'm okay, I understand how to do this. I know how to open up someone's trauma body now really easily. I can actually just I can do that in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But can I help them navigate it in a way that's really healthy itself without creating more trauma? I got to take ownership. I'm still learning that. I'm really grateful. One of my clients has been through, he's been through war. Yeah. He speaks about that. And he's had extreme professional help on navigating these traumas that get in his body, because there's been times that it's opened up in him and his whole nervous system has actually curled in on itself and he can't physically unlock his fingers because of the trauma just by touching it that lives in his body. Well, if we're not experienced with that and we just roll over there like, hey, I'm ready to share some love and light with the people who've been going through, a genocide, that's going to be a really fucking harsh wake up for anybody who goes to do that.
110%. Like this is, and your story parallels mine so much. I like fucking learned Reiki 1 and I was like, oh my God. And
bring all your shit to me.
Yeah, just like, shut the fuck up. Like, and so like, I mean, this is like, but if you've been at this for years, right, and you understand the layers, like there is a responsibility to like, to really understand, at least allow that little hit in of like, how can I best serve like what's occurring in the collective, right, and to act and be on it, while being conscious enough to understand your own limitations. Like it is such a skill. It is such a skill to understand your own limitations and to be able to discern that correctly.
Amen.
Because like hell was paved with good intentions.
Amen. Yeah. It reminds me of a story of, there was a tornado in Joplin, Missouri, which was only about an hour and a half from where I grew up. I lived in Kansas City. Yeah. And this was like an F5. It was devastating, completely just mowed this city down. Mm-hmm. And I saw it and immediately was like, I need to help. Yeah. And I wasn't the only one that had that thought, because like millions of people drove to Joplin, Missouri from Kansas City, from St. Louis, from Branson, from all over. And we all show up and there are these people sitting around in their front lawns with their houses completely mowed down. And we all just show up and we're like, we're here to help. And all the people were like, get the fuck away from us. Like, stay out of here. And no one knew what to do. We just ended up, it was really just unintentionally a trauma tourism trip where I just went and saw trauma because I couldn't help, because I didn't actually have the tools to do it. And in showing up without any kind of real resources, just showing up and be like, I'm here, I can help, without a knowing of how, we caused way more harm. I remember showing up, getting out of my car and walking up to somebody and was like, how can I help you? And they're like, you can help me by getting the fuck out of my personal property right now. Yeah. Because all their stuff had been thrown all over the lawn. There's millions of people and they're scared that their like stuff is going to be stolen, or they're just in trauma. Yeah. And so some of this is recognizing it's such a complex dance. And so that's also why like it's really important for you to do the internal work to find what your cause is. You can listen to this, and if it's pulling at the heartstrings to hear about the conflict that's going on, and you're like, I want to help. Well, the best way you can help is to just start working on yourself. That is the best way to help everybody on the planet. That sounds counterintuitive, but it is actually the truth. It is actually the truth. The more you help yourself.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, right? Like I said, internal revolution that expands outwards, but like it has to come in first. Exactly. It has to come in first. There's not, I really believe this. I think your ability to serve from a real place in the external world, like even if you can serve very, very much initially, like it will not hold unless the internal work has been done, unless there has been an internal excavation within, like that, whatever action or thing you take on the outside reality, like the foundation will be faulty. Yeah. Right. So yeah, this is why this is balance, and everyone's journey is different. I want to really expand on that. Everyone's journey is different, but where my journey is going, like I could not have envisioned that 4 years ago. I think, we're talking about like a year, 2 years out of awakening. Like I'm in Missouri, like doing some trauma healing and energetic work at a healing, like in a healing center. And so it's about being open to like that this new earth, I think, is going to come in ways that we did not anticipate or imagine. especially from like, you know, I gotta be honest, with like social media influencers have been feeding us on it. It's going to come in differently. And so to be very open and receptive that that your journey might look different than what you anticipated. And that's not wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Zack, I really appreciate this conversation that we're having. I think that's a beautiful place to wrap this up. And I'm curious, for the listener who wants to interact or engage with you, how can they do that? Is that something through Instagram? Do you have a call? Do you have a way you want people to interact with you?
Yeah, Instagram's the best way. I am Zack Alexander, Zack with a K. And so find me on there. That's the best way to engage with me. We will also be building this. I'm in the very preliminary stages of this. But I have an online community that I'm likely going to start in a couple months. Very low monthly subscription fee, but I'm really trying to create an online space where people who are on this journey can come together, can communicate, can find one another. I'll lead like workshops throughout the month too, going over some of these concepts. And then I have my online course, the Healers Program, which teaches a lot of these things, right? Self-paced, and it's available to you through finding me on Instagram.
Amazing. Brother, I'm really grateful for this conversation, and I am excited to be a part of this inner revolution alongside you. You know, we don't have to be alone in this inner revolution, and that goes to the listener too. Is like, you can be in your own inner revolution, and it's so important to be in community while you're doing that.
Yes, couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So,
For having me, brother.
Thank you. And to the listener, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Hard for Life podcast. We'll see you next time. Have a great day. Bro, we went there. Holy shit.